child.
Evan Chandler goes to custody court and says, "I want to have a week of custody with my son." And June Chandler agrees on the basis that he'll be returned after 7 days.
And he never gave them back. He kept them. He never brought them back. And during that time that he had him, he came into my office and he was behind closed doors with my attorney. The Jordan Chandler was. I actually opened up the door one day. I was leaving and I opened up the door and Jordy was in the back. And he kind of looked a little startled because I looked and I saw him and I was like, nobody in the office knew that he was even there. We were like, how did he even get here? And I opened up the door. So I had a few encounters with Jordy Chandler coming into the office, and to me, it just looked like a coaching session.
While Jordy was in Evan's custody, Evan sedated him with a drug called sodium amytal. He did this supposedly so that he could perform a dental procedure, but it's a very dubious story that he's telling because there's no reason to use sodium amytal for a dental procedure. He gives him this drug, which has a reputation in the 1980s as a truth serum. The problem is that sodium amytal is not a truth serum. In just around 1993, the evidence was beginning to emerge that in fact sodium amytal was the opposite of a truth serum. It made people highly suggestible. So by 2000s, Psychology Today and other journals were saying that it was completely false that sodium amytal had a reputation as a truth serum.
So I'm just going to take a step back for everyone. Evan Chandler makes a phone call to David Schwartz talking about how he is going to make allegations against Michael Jackson. Jordan Chandler subsequently denies all allegations. Evan Chandler then gets custody of Jordan Chandler and never returns him. It was only supposed to be for a week. And during this period that Evan Chandler had Jordan Chandler, there were numerous unethical methods that we know of being used against Jordan. Notably the use of sodium amytal and the one-on-one coaching between Jordan Chandler and Barry Rothman. So by the end of Jordan's stay, he changes his story. He went into Evan's custody saying that he wasn't abused by Michael Jackson, to now claiming that, yes, in fact, I had been abused. So Charles, with this new shocking statement by Jordan Chandler, what are Evan Chandler's next moves?
So after Jordy changes his story, Evan, instead of going straight to the police, as you'd expect a parent to do if their child has just said that they've been sexually abused by someone, goes directly to Michael Jackson and his legal team and starts demanding $20 million.
But Evan had a desire to be a filmmaker. He was trying to get the money so he could make a movie.
So when Evan meets Michael to confront him and demand the money, there were witnesses in the room who said that he threw his arms around Michael and greeted him with a hug like an old friend.
I was seated in our big conference room next to Michael, and the father came into the room and saw Michael and went quickly across the room and hugged him and said, "Michael, it's been so long since I've seen you," which was just flabbergasting, because here's a father claiming that this man had abused his son sexually and rushes across the room to hug him. Impossible.
Evan's lawyer gets in touch with Michael Jackson's camp and says $20 million and nobody will ever hear about these allegations. But Michael Jackson is adamant that he is not going to give Evan Chandler $20 million. The counteroffer which comes back from Michael Jackson's camp is a deal for 3 scripts, and they say you'll be paid $350,000 per script.
He said, I'll contribute that to your film project just to give you and your son a chance to mend, because at that time, Evan was saying he's stolen my son's affection. He put that in the paperwork. He said, my son is being starstruck by this superstar. He's stolen my son's affection. And so Michael just simply said,
this would be a great opportunity for you and Jordy to reconnect because you'll be able to write them together. Rothman comes back and says, that's nowhere near what we're asking for. That's less than $2 million. We're not going for that. Michael's camp then makes another offer, which is for a single script paid at $350,000, a third of what they'd initially offered. Barry Rothman is shocked by the low figure. In response to that, Evan panics and starts trying to go back to the $1 million deal. And Anthony Pellicano comes back and says, that's never going to happen.
Let me ask you for the last time. He has rejected the deal, period.
For one project, yes.
Okay. So then there is no deal.
Right,
Remember?
right.
I said take it or leave it.
Bingo.
Okay. Then we don't have to have a discussion about this again.
Okay.
All right.
That's where it's at.
I've already told you that we think that this is an extortion attempt from the beginning. I've already made those statements to you time and time again.
You can say that, Ann. I understand. But
Okay.
it fell apart because you offered freight and then recanted on it.
Meanwhile, the custody situation happens between Evan and June.
But what happened was June filed an ex parte motion. An ex parte motion means show up in court the next day. She was trying to get him back now. And so we typed a little declaration, and they went to court. They went to court on the ex parte. But see, he had been negotiating with Michael for a whole month for the $20 million to make the movie. He goes to court on a hearing for the custody. A family law judge, he said nothing to that judge about his suspicion or I think my child is, being molested. He didn't say anything. So the judge ordered him to return Jordy back instantly.
And in order to maintain custody, Evan has to go to the psychiatrist and have Jordy disclose.
I can promise you 3 days later is when we got the breaking news. So he never took him back. He took him to the doctor that he had already queried about molestation.
He sort of acts out of haste and goes and triggers the criminal proceedings as a knee-jerk reaction to the custody situation. And then that means he loses control of the situation and the negotiations cease because the police are now involved.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Good evening. Michael Jackson is in Bangkok, Thailand tonight, where he has now postponed 2 concerts claiming that he is ill. Well, back in Los Angeles, there's a press frenzy over investigations into child abuse by Jackson.
Remains the Children's Services report detailing the charges by a 13-year-old boy. That boy says that he and Jackson often...
The media went into a frenzy because after the Michael Jackson case kicked in, basically their ratings went through the roof. It was astronomical, the difference that this story made to the ratings of shows like Hard Copy and A Current Affair.
I cannot think of a story that's bigger... this is a story, if not of the decade, well, certainly of the decade, but probably of one of the great stories of the century.
This was an era with no internet and no social media, and so there was a real thirst for knowledge about Michael Jackson, because he was the biggest, most famous person in the world, but people really knew basically nothing about him. There was a need to keep the story going every day. They needed new Michael Jackson stories, because that was where the ratings were coming from. So the impetus was there for journalists to seize on anything that came up, anything that looked like a scoop or a scandal, or looked like it might bag them ratings. They just ran with it.
We will fly stories. We will take a shred of fact and go with it like a great footballer with a ball. We will spin down the field with that and try and score a goal with it. And maybe we will, maybe we won't. But we'll take a shred of evidence and try and turn it into a story.
I will say that I am particularly upset by the handling of this mass matter by the incredible, terrible mass media. At every opportunity, the media has dissected and manipulated these allegations to reach their own conclusions. I ask all of you to wait and hear the truth before you label or condemn me. Don't treat me like a criminal, because I am innocent.
When you buy a story, there's always a shadow of doubt that are they telling you the truth or are they telling you what you want to hear?
They started waving around $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 to anybody that was prepared to say, I have met Michael Jackson and I've got something bad to say about him.
Yeah, a friend of mine told National Inquiry that he knew some family that knew the Jacksons, and they called me on the phone and asked me to come to the hotel. I said, I'm here to help Michael. Oh, he said, oh no, That ain't what we want with you. We heard it that your boy's been nice at the house. We want to know Michael tampered with him. Just picked him up or touched him in any kind of way. If he did, we got $200,000 for you. I said, huh? He said, you said, what I'm going to do? I'm going to draw a check up, a contract up, and I'm going to show you we're going to give you $200,000.
So then you go to Germany, you get another 20,000. You go to Italy, another 20,000. Before you know it, you're up at $200,000, and that is enough for a family to come forward and talk.
It happened repeatedly where people of dubious character were treated as credible sources when anybody with just an iota of investigative savvy would know that these are not people you want to be staking your reputation on. They were people who changed their stories depending on how much money you offered them.
The first time I heard the story about Jackson, his hand was outside the kid's pants. They were asking $100,000. As soon as their price went up to $500,000, the hand went inside the pants. So, come on.
But basically, LaToya, you're drawing your own conclusion that Michael abused young men, young boys.
No, I'm not drawing my own conclusion that he abused young boys. That's totally wrong. I am not drawing my own conclusion.
LaToya Jackson at the time was married to a man called Jack Gordon, who was involved with Genovese Mafia. He was a very disturbed character. He was very violent and abusive. He pimped LaToya out like a prostitute. He forced her to do semi-pornographic magazine shoots and that kind of thing. And if she disagreed with him or refused to do anything that he told her to, then he would either beat her or he would threaten to have members of her family killed.
This went on for many, many, many years. And
he literally said, I'm going to kill you, your brother, everybody.
Yes. No, not everybody. Just myself.
And Michael.
Michael and Jan.
This is not some excuse which has been dreamed up subsequently. This was known and reported at the time.
He grabbed a bedspread, he put it over her head, started to strangle her with it. At the same time, he grabbed her arm and started to twist it so badly that she felt like it was going to come up.
And so all of a sudden, LaToya, who'd been previously speaking out in favor of Michael, suddenly U-turned and started selling interviews claiming that her brother, in fact, was guilty. In early 1994, LaToya appeared on an Australian TV show, and the host of the show realized that there was something wrong with the situation. He realized that all of the answers LaToya was giving were being fed to her by somebody else, who he identified on the show as her husband, Jack Gordon.
Well, Ms. Jackson carried on with that nonsense for about another 25 minutes, all the time being prompted by someone in the studio, but off camera. Presumably her husband, manager Jack Gordon.
People like you will let this go on, and it's very, very wrong.
Talking to you in the background?
I refuse to sit here and listen to you talk this way. I think it's wrong with you.
Who's talking to you in the background?
So I have nothing else to say to you whatsoever.
When he questioned her about it on the air, she just looked like a deer in the headlights and suddenly stood up and stormed off the show and wouldn't answer any more questions.
I can't hear you, but I definitely want you to hear what I'm saying. Because you do have a serious problem, sir. Whatever it is, I don't know. But you do need to go see a psychiatrist. Goodbye.
Her husband decided that there was a lot of money to be made from switching sides and saying that Michael was guilty, and indeed there was.
I'm sorry. Do you feel okay? Are you right? You're right. They made a handkerchief from something like that.
After the allegation hit, prior to that, they were on opposite end, because June never did agree with the allegation. But after the allegation hit, they were meeting in my attorney, David Schwartz, June Chandler, Evan Chandler, and my attorney. They were all meeting behind closed doors in my attorney's office.
I decided to drop the case because I, at the time as an attorney, did not like to be involved in cases that I didn't believe in.
And I heard Evan blurt out, he says, my ass is in danger of going to prison right here. Inside the law office, the only thing they were asking for was money. Where's this money? How much? They were sending discovery in, and the discovery was only trying to find his money. That was crazy too. I'm like, y'all just looking for money? You're not looking for justice? You're only looking for money?
I mean, my mind exploded when I found out who he was, and I definitely